Let's continue our series on the book of Hebrews. We're finishing up the next to last chapter today, leaving us a mere 25 verses after today. The book of Hebrews, new priesthood, new hope, new covenant. Now, as we accelerate toward the conclusion of the book, we remember the contrast that was drawn, the horror film versus the love story, the strong contrast that was developed by the author between the Mosaic covenant and the new covenant. That's not my creativity that is revealed by that slide, but the actual words of the author of Hebrews himself. That strong contrast of the Mount Sinai and the shaking and the quaking and the fright and the terror and the horror of God speaking from Mount Sinai versus the Mount of Zion, the symbol of not only of Jerusalem, but of the New Jerusalem, the heavenly Jerusalem that descends from God's presence. Story of two mountains, two experiences, and a story of two covenants. The Mosaic covenant, the new covenant, the story of two covenant mediators, Moses and Yeshua. Just to recap where we've been before we get into the new stuff. But you, strong contrast, you're coming not to Mount Sinai and to the terror and the horror. You have come to Mount Zion, to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. And the inhabitants of the heavenly city of Jerusalem are, first of all, myriads of angels. Secondly, the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven. It's the church. To God, the judge of all, a very important theme, considering that we're weeks away from celebrating and commemorating the anniversary of creation, the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Not only God, the judge of all, but spirits of the righteous made perfect, Old Testament saints who have preceded the church, some of whom the previous chapter spoke of with tremendous eloquence, who are now in God's presence and awaiting the resurrection to come. And the final inhabitant of the heavenly Jerusalem is Yeshua. And Yeshua specifically in his role as mediator of a new covenant under the sprinkled blood, his blood, Yeshua's blood that ratifies the new covenant, not the blood of bulls, not the blood of calves, not the blood of goats, but Yeshua's blood, the blood of the Son of God, that ratifies not the Mosaic covenant, not the Abrahamic covenant, but it ratifies the new covenant. The sprinkled blood which speaks better than the blood of Abel. So, again, citizens of heavenly Jerusalem, there's 5 that are listed: angels, church, Father, God, Old Testament saints, and, of course, the Son. In contrast to the dark gloom of Sinai, The new covenant brings fresh air, brilliant sunlight. And remember that it is Yeshua's sprinkled blood that has initiated the new covenant. There's no new covenant without Yeshua's sprinkled blood. And he has accomplished our redemption. You are redeemed. You have been to redeem. What does it mean to redeem? To purchase something or someone at great value, with something of great value. We think about the fact that we are bought with a price. We have been redeemed. What was exchanged of value for something of value? The blood of our Messiah was shed on our behalf. To think of, I have a coupon this week. It's a wonderful coupon for a free Whataburger. And you know, I can't just go up to the Whataburger window and say, hello, how do you do? I'm Mr. Gare, I'd like my free burger. No. I have to hand them my coupon before they will give me a free burger. I must give them something of value to receive something of value. Our Messiah has shed his blood, died, rose again, ascended into the presence of our Father, and has accomplished our redemption. His blood, what did it cost God? Everything. The life of his Son, shed blood. What do we receive? Life everlasting. Bought and paid for by our Messiah. So let's not walk around thinking that we're our own man, our own person, our own woman. We can do whatever we want. We can live however we want. We can do to our bodies whatever we want. If I wake up one day, for example, and I decide to say, instead of singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning," I instead get up and sing, "I enjoy being a girl." Can't do it. My body is not my own. Our lives are not our own. We belong to Messiah. Why? Because he redeemed us with his own blood. When I go to the window at Whataburger, nobody's taking, and I've redeemed the coupon for the free burger, nobody's taking my burger away from me because it was bought with a price. It cannot hop out of my car and do whatever it wants and go into somebody else's car. It belongs to me because I redeemed it. We belong to Yeshua because he redeemed us. New material. New material. The final warning. Hebrews has been a book interspersed periodically with a series of warnings. And here we are now finally arrived at the final warning, which arises from the immediately prior discussion of our superior status under Yeshua's mediation of the new covenant. And that's again in contrast to the Mosaic covenant. Mountain of Sinai is contrasted with the glories of the heavenly Jerusalem awaiting to be revealed and enjoyed in the future. So, if we take this warning and we integrate this warning at the end of chapter 12 that we're about to get to, with the previous warnings that we've seen through the book, we will come to a synthesis and understand truly what it is that not warning us, it's warning the recipients of the letter, the people to whom the author is trying to convince. Remember the warnings in Hebrews? We saw a warning about drifting from Messianic faith. We saw that in chapter 2, right at the beginning. Next chapter, we saw a warning regarding disobedience and doubt, using the example of the generation from the Exodus that disbelieved, the two positive spies disbelieved God, that he would take them into the promised land, that he could take the land. They didn't believe, and they rebelled against him, and they paid the price of not entering the promised land. They lived their lives out, in other words, wandering around in the wilderness. They didn't wander for 40 years because Moses didn't have a GPS. They wandered as a matter of judgment until the final member of that Exodus generation, of that rebellious generation, dropped in the wilderness. We see in chapter 5, or chapter 6, see a warning regarding spiritual stagnation. So again, a particular people at a particular time in a particular place. You guys, I'm warning you about, your boat looks like it's losing its mooring, it's slipping its mooring. Don't drift from the Messianic faith. You're making me nervous. You guys, don't be disobedient. Don't be doubtful. You guys, knock it off with your spiritual stagnation. You should be champions by now, but you're still running laps. Previously, or recently rather, we saw a warning. You guys, watch out for the inferior lifestyle that accompanies faithlessness. You must have faithfulness, not faithlessness. And now finally, the cherry on the top is going to be a warning. Hey, you guys, to whom I am writing, watch out for spiritual sensitivity. Put your antenna up, your spiritual antenna up. Do not drift away from your trust in Messiah. Do not follow in the rebellious doubtfulness of your ancestors. Do not continue to stubbornly refuse to trust in God's power to deliver you. Do not express contempt with your faithlessness. Contempt for the ministry of all three members of the Godhead by yielding to fear, faith, not fear, and publicly endorsing the Mosaic covenant over the new because of how it plays out in your neighborhood, because you're afraid of cancel culture. Cancel culture, nothing new. It's 2,000 years old. And this one is going to be about spiritual sensitivity. And it begins with this, see to it. It's a great word. Look. Take a look. See to it, emphatically at the beginning of the sentence. The community got to be on guard. Watch yourselves. Don't follow the example of the Exodus generation. It didn't end well for them. That generation had literally begged God to shut up. Do you remember this? We looked at this passage, I think, last week. Deuteronomy 4:12. When they're at Sinai and God is speaking to them from the mountain, giving them the 10 Commandments. And Jehovah, the Lord, the covenant God, spoke to you from the midst of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but you saw no form, only a voice, and a whole lot of fire. You said, behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory. Jehovah has shown us his glory, his greatness. We've heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We've seen today that God speaks with man, yet he lives. Why should we push our luck? Now then, why should we die? Just because we made it through this time doesn't mean we'll make it through the next time. For this great fire will consume us if we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer, then we will die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God, speaking from the midst of fire as we have, and lived? Who has done this? Go near, Moses. You hear all the Lord that our God says, then you speak to us. In your presence there's a significant decrease in fire, shaking, and scariness. So you speak to us, all the Lord our God speaks to you. We will hear and we'll do it. So I just read you this passage again, second week in a row, to remind you that the people of God, Israel, the Jewish people, literally told God, shut up. We don't want to hear from you directly. Speak to him. But see, the one who spoke from Sinai now speaks from heaven with this epistle, the epistle of Hebrews. And the Lord has no tolerance, the author is saying, to his recipients. The Lord has no tolerance for being tuned out by his children. We all know, those of us who have children, the frustration of saying, make sure you take out the garbage, and it doesn't get done. And did you empty the dishwasher? And the next day, the light is still on? Did you empty the dishwasher? Our kids have a unique capacity to tune out their parents of things that they're not interested in hearing. And if we have minute tolerance for being tuned out by our children, imagine how much less tolerance the Lord has for being tuned out by his children, hence the final warning. For if those did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape who turn away from him who warns from heaven. This is one of the great rhetorical tactics. We've seen it over and over again. It's Kal v'chomer, the light and the heavy. If this happened to this group of people who are in a less significant position, you who are now in a more significant position, therefore, how much more so, right? So you have the strong contrast to disdain the sacrifice of Jesus because of current pressures of Yeshua certainly is of greater consequence than the Exodus generation, right? If the Exodus generation living under the Mosaic covenant could not escape divine discipline because of their rejection of God, which they couldn't, back to warning in chapter 3, the Kadesh Barnea Exodus generation dropping in the wilderness. How could a generation living under the superior new covenant escape undergoing even greater discipline for this level of rebellion? And his voice then, for that Exodus generation, shook the earth. We just read the passage, and everybody was afraid and said, stop, Lord. Talk to him. Don't talk to us. We'll take it secondhand, thank you. Again, to disdain Yeshua's sacrifice is of much greater spiritual consequence than to repudiate Moses' leadership. It's not the Moses, right? But Moses' leadership. It stands to reason, therefore, that the punishment for a violation of the superior would be much more severe than that which is inferior. So, if you have this first generation Jewish believing group placing themselves by their fear, by their faithlessness, in a adversarial position, one would expect some judgment. One would expect some discipline. Of course, what is the more severe discipline than the Exodus generation received, right? Because the Lord has never been squeamish about daring to discipline. This is not an issue for him. The answer can be found in defining the discipline from which there can be no escape. The warning passages that we've seen, you always have to go, what is it you are being warned about? So when the Exodus generation and the fact that they dropped dead in the wilderness over time, over 40 years period of time, when that's your comparative starting point, and you got to escalate from there, how much room is left for severity? A greater sin requires a greater punishment. What's the nature of the punishment? The text must be that the Hebrews, like the Hebrews, their forefathers, in the Exodus generation, as one experienced physical death, so too the Hebrews generation will experience physical death as well. But that doesn't sound like that's an escalation. It sounds like physical death. That's why so many people want to see spiritual death here. Okay, if you blow off God as a believer, he'll send you to hell. No, that doesn't follow, right? Because if they've once trusted Yeshua, you have irrevocable spiritual benefits. You cannot be deprived of eternal salvation. But if they turn away even temporarily to re-identify with the generation of Israel that happens to be, again, timing is everything, that happens to be under the impending judgment that is inexorably arriving, particularly actually within that decade. This is written in the 60s. The decade 66 is when the revolution begins, the revolt begins. And by 73, everything is done. By 70, within 4 years, the temple is destroyed. Hundreds of thousands are killed, taken away into exile and slavery. If you identify with this group, you will share in the divine discipline that is unleashed against the nation. Why are they being judged to begin with? It's the unpardonable sin of Jewish national rejection of Yeshua, the judgment that would come. Unimagined devastation. If you compare the judgment that occurs in 70 AD over and against the judgment that occurred to the Exodus generation in the wilderness, it makes the Exodus generation's allowing them to drop one by one as their lifespans ended. Relatively merciful in comparison. Because salvation, see, it can't be they lose their salvation. We can't even allow that to be a possibility, because salvation is divinely granted, and therefore it's never ours to forfeit, no matter what level of spiritual insensitivity and potential rebellion. They know that, the author knows that, and we should know that. So he's saying, do not get caught up in the coming cataclysm that's coming because of the actions of the leaders of Israel in rejecting Yeshua. Those who have trusted in Messiah enjoy irrevocable spiritual benefits, will never be deprived of God's eternal salvation. That was true then. By the way, it's true now. If you believe in Messiah, and for whatever reason, you find yourself, shall we say cavalierly, find yourself a naughty boy or a naughty girl for a period of time, someone who is living inconsistently or has been living inconsistently with their faith commitment and the fact that they don't belong to themselves. They were bought by a price. They were redeemed by Yeshua. Your behavior cannot forfeit your salvation. Your behavior did not merit your salvation to begin with. What makes you think that your behavior suddenly can merit the forfeit of your salvation? It can't. So get that out of your heads and put that worry out of mind. However, I wouldn't recommend that you test God by saying, well, I can't lose my salvation, so I can live any way I want. No. That's the equivalent of spitting in God's face. Don't spit in God's face just to see what he would react. Don't try to press God's buttons. I don't think you'll like the consequences. Verse 26, and his voice shook the earth then. But now he is promised, saying, yet once more. This is Haggai 2:6. The prophet Haggai. Different context, original context, this quotation was the prophet encouraging Israel's glorious future at some time after the Babylonian exile. But the verse is being taken here by the author from Haggai and saying, watch what's coming. He has promised, saying, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, so not only a judgment on Israel and Jerusalem, there's something even bigger coming subsequent to that in the unknown future. But I will also shake the heaven as the mountain of Sinai shook in Israel's history. In the future, the entirety of heaven and earth will be shaken. Shaken, not stirred. Shaken as well, prior to the end of the age. Isaiah 13 speaks of this as well in the 13th verse. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken from its place at the fury of the Lord of hosts, in the day of his burning anger. There is a cosmic convulsion that is coming. And that will talk about great reset. Klaus Schwab cannot, in his wildest imaginings, wrestle with what God is going to do regarding his great reset. Every temporary component of creation that can be shaken will be. It'll be interesting, ladies, for those of you engaging in the Revelation study about to begin in September. I think you'll find it eye-opening. I think it will arrest your attention. But what we are experiencing now, everything that is around us, it's temporary. All that's going to remain when the Messianic age dawns and our Messiah comes is that which is permanent and that which is unshakable. The world is up in arms about this or that. Little European teenagers chide the nations, the world's leaders, saying, "How dare you?" Right? Worrying about climate change. Should worry about what God is going to do. Not worry. Don't worry, little Greta. Don't worry, big clouds, about what man and CO2 can do. Worry about what our God has promised to do. That's not hypothesis. That's not theory. And I'll tell you this much. When it comes to what God has said, the science is settled. The expression, "yet once more," denotes the removing of those things that can be shaken. As of created things. All of creation is going to shake. Heaven, earth, everything that is impermanent will be shaken. So that those things which cannot shaken will remain. Now we have been given an unshakable kingdom. We are citizens not only of this world, but we are citizens of the New Jerusalem, the heavenly city. The future is secure. It is unshakable for us. What is the appropriate response? Therefore, since we receive a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and that's not only heavenly Jerusalem, that's also the millennium, the Messianic kingdom, the 1,000-year reign, when our Messiah will rule from Jerusalem on the throne of his father David. What's the appropriate attitude? An attitude of gratitude. Let us be grateful. The only appropriate response is one of a worshipful attitude and gratitude and reverent awe, by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe. It's hard sometimes to maintain a worshipful attitude. Distractions pop in, you know this. But when we think of what God is doing and what the future is secure. It's not theory, it's not hypothesis, it's secure. It's certain. We must make every effort, see to it, look, take a look, get involved. The passage began. Have a worshipful attitude. What does that mean? I should be singing all the time. I should have a song in my heart and a jaunty step as I go through life. No, a worshipful attitude that is characterized by two things: gratitude, thank you, Lord, and reverent awe. I'm so glad you have this under control. No matter what I'm going through, no matter what my family has experienced, no matter what our nation is experiencing, no matter what our world is experiencing, we know that you've got the whole world in your hands. And I remember you are an awesome God. And I revere you, treasure you. And we see verse 29 at the conclusion of the chapter. The conclusion comes to a halt, or the discussion comes to a conclusion. The author said what he's going to say, and he punctuates it with a simple reminder from the same passage of Deuteronomy that we read earlier regarding God and why they told him, hey, we don't want any more from you. We'll go to Moses. You can go to Moses, Moses go to you, and we'll deal with him as the middleman. It's a simple reminder that why it's in our best interest to choose an appropriate response to what our God is doing. For our God is a consuming fire. This comes from Deuteronomy 4, same chapter. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Our eternal future, every believer, today and back then, the Hebrews, their future was certain. It was secure. Eternal future. And we certainly know what's going to happen at the end of the age, of this age. The Messianic age is going to dawn. Following cataclysm. 70 AD cataclysm, a tiny taste in comparison. There will be a cataclysmic moment during the time of Jacob's trouble, during the great tribulation, when all creation is divinely shaken. But getting back to the context, the immediate issue for the Jewish believers living in first century Jerusalem, their immediate fate was dependent upon the reasonableness of their faith choices. So, the author, by this point, with one chapter now, 25 verses to go, the author successfully laid out every compelling argument he wished to present, every theological precept that he wished to impart, and every warning that he desired to issue. What remains is only the rich content of certain pastoral exhortations concerning believers' obligations to God and to each other. And to that end, I told you I would bring this up again last week. I bring it up again today now, and keeping my promise. A reminder that Yeshua, being the mediator of the new covenant, raises the question of which area of your life is Yeshua not Lord? In other words, which component, which area of your life, which part of your life have you yet to yield, or are you inconsistently yielding to God? Because his blood impacts the church you attend or the church you don't attend. And believe me, I've had enough conversations with a large number of people who are, for the time being, content to watch most weeks or all weeks at home to be part of our congregation, but yet they're in but not of? What can I say? Except to encourage you. You are not your own. No matter how delightful it is to sit at home and relax in your pajamas and your sweatpants and what have you on a Saturday morning. You're not your own. You have been bought as a price. And we are not to neglect the assembling together of believers. That, I didn't make that up. That's something we read in the book of Hebrews already. So if you're not currently a part of a church, a congregation, a local manifestation of the body of Messiah, it's time. That's why this is the time that I have invited you to become members of our congregation. Nothing magical about membership. It simply denotes a higher level of commitment to this congregation and to the Lord. It's a public commitment that goes above and beyond those who are attending or those who are irregularly attending or sporadic attenders or viewers on the internet, etc., etc. Again, I'm not interested in shaming you. I'm not interested in chastising you or anything. This is embarrassing. That's not my interest whatsoever. My interest is in encouraging you to allow the blood of Messiah to impact your engagement with the Mishpucha, with your brothers and sisters in the Messiah, to allow us to use our spiritual gifts to your benefit, to give you the opportunity of allowing your spiritual gifts to ensure tomorrow to our benefits. What kind of goals do you have for your lives? Do you have a goal for your life? Okay, maybe you're not a big goal setter. Maybe that's not your cup of tea. Set a small goal. Be a small goal setter. But whatever goals you set, I want you to consider whether or not it aligns with the blood of Yeshua. That goes with your desires as well. I have healthy desires. I have unhealthy desires. I have wholesome desires. I have unwholesome desires. I don't imagine I am alone in that. So I want you to join me in attempting to align our individual desires with our Messiah's desires for us. We know what his desires are for us. They're expressed in the text. We have 2 testaments, 66 books that tell us God's desires for us. Right? So it's not hard to figure out the people walking around, looking for God's will. Let me find God's will for my life. As if God's will is somehow lost. I put it under a chair? Is it in the closet in the back somewhere? I got to find God's will for my... No, God's will for your life is expressed pretty broad and some very specific instances. Let's align our lives. And then we get specific with that. Cash on the barrelhead. What do we spend our money on? I'm not saying that everything that we spend should, every discretionary dollar that I have should be spent on mission support or should be spent on support. I'm not saying supporting the church. I'm not saying that. I'm saying make choices with your cash, with your investments that are aligned with our God. The time that you spend, how do you spend your time? What do you spend your time watching? What do you spend your time doing? What kind of marriage do you have? Good example? What kind of career do you have? What kind of business are you involved in? You know what really bugs me, I have to tell you? It has to do with my own choices. it bothers me that when it comes to the business that I engage in, like my investments, things like that, it bothers me that because I want to, in my retirement, in Adrian and I retirement investments, that we want to make sure that we are good stewards and that we don't spend so much regarding percentages and fees. And the best bargain out there for investing is to invest in like a BlackRock index. But you know, BlackRock as a corporation is putting its thumb on the scale of unrighteousness, not only here in our country, but around the world. I don't like what BlackRock or State Street or some of these other places stand for. But yet, it's the best bargain for investing my dollars. What do I do? It's a conundrum. I haven't solved the conundrum. Believe me. Okay? Nobody likes to shop on Amazon more than this guy. I love Amazon. Prime or not. I'm a big fan. You know why? Because I like receiving things in 2 days. I have an itch. I want it scratched right now. And if I have to wait 3 days, I'll wait 3 days. Okay, whatever. But 2 days, as a general rule, is what I want. And I want to be able to, whatever I want to buy, I not only want to receive it fast, but I want to get a bargain on it. And so for me, Amazon.com is generally a very delightful place for me to spend my time. And then I think to myself, who benefits? You know, we always say follow the money, right? Who benefits from this or that action? Who benefits when I spend my money on Amazon.com? Jeff Bezos does. Do I approve how Jeff Bezos is spending his money and what he stands for, and that I'm giving my profits to my equity into his pocket? I don't like it. I haven't solved the problem. I don't know how I'm going to solve that problem. What am I going to do? Sometimes you go to Main Street, right? You try to go to the small business guy, okay? And even though the small businessman, I'm a small businessman too. I'm on ministry. It's a small ministry, and the church is a small church. So I understand small business. I appreciate small business. And I have to wrap my head around that sometimes if I want to go and support local business, as opposed to putting my money in Jeff Bezos and those corporations that stand for things that I don't stand for and that contribute to things that I don't believe, I had to get my head wrapped around that I should go and inconvenience myself by driving to a small business somewhere or pay shipping for a small business to send it to me, or pay more for the item than I would had I purchased it at Amazon. I'm still working through. You're looking at a man who hasn't figured this out yet, okay? But I'm asking the questions. And we'll look at some more of these things perhaps next time as well. Please make it your business to consider whether you want to join our congregation, by the way, FYI. And I'm still looking for people who would like to be involved in the Saturday school 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock hour. Short-term commitments, either to teach a topic or to facilitate a video series so that we can get our 9 o'clock hour reinvigorated and launched once again. I'm sorry I come before you without having all the answers, but I'd rather be honest with you, and we can wrestle with these things and work through them together as a family. If I somehow get some insight between now and then, I'll let you know. Okay, I won't leave you bereft, and I will grow along with you as I wrestle with Yeshua's blood impacting every area of my life and our lives as families and as a congregation. All right. Well, having said that, let's go ahead and just to show you this chart, this was the chart we began, the graphical representation of Hebrews thematic development. And you can see chapter 12, which we've just finished. The new sacrifice in faith was important. But now that we get to chapter 13, we're going to see the new high priest, the new covenant, and every other subject is complete. The great theme, the main theme of the supremacy of Yeshua. Not going to talk about that anymore. It's getting down to the nitty-gritty, just like I just did. The nitty-gritty into how now you live your life. You've got these great theological precepts and concepts that he's laid out before us. All right, but how does that walk around in shoe leather? Put some overalls on those theological truths, man, and show me how they walk around, how they walk and talk. And so that we've come now to chapter 13, to the final wrap up, and we will proceed next week with that wrap up. The next 2 weeks we'll be wrapping up the book of Hebrews. All right, let's stand for the Aaronic benediction.